From Reuters, Facebook refriends Australia after changes to media laws. So we have a deal now between Facebook and Australia, and it looks like Facebook News will be back in Australia. Unfortunately for the Australian people, they will have Facebook once again distributing their manipulated news in the Australian market. So bad news for the people of Australia. It must have been nice to not have had Facebook operating in your country. But it looks like Facebook has now struck a deal with the government, and they will be back in Australia. Some people are saying that Facebook backtracked. Some people are saying that the Australian government backtracked. Facebook are the losers. Australian government is the losers. Facebook are the winners. Australian government are the winners. Okay, you're hearing different opinions. At the end of the day, I think they just struck a deal because, most importantly, I think for Facebook, Facebook had to strike a deal. I don't think they had much of a choice because this same type of law is about to be implemented in Canada, and after Canada, the UK, and after the UK, every country is going to start implementing these types of laws on big tech, because it means more money for the state, but more money for the big media oligarchs in each country, and they're going to lobby their local governments to say, we want a piece of the Google, Facebook, Twitter revenue. And they're going to lobby their local governments, and the governments are going to put these laws in place with big tech. And so Facebook pulling out of Australia, knowing that Canada was going to pass a similar law, was in a tough position. And I said this in my previous video. I said that Facebook will go back to Australia. Will most likely go back to Australia and negotiate something, because Facebook can't possibly negotiate a deal with Canada for news distribution while being out of the Australian market. And then Facebook can't negotiate a deal with the UK news and be out of the Australian market. So Facebook had to resolve Australia so they can then focus on Canada and then focus on every other country that's going to be coming out and asking for these types of licensing deals. Facebook had to figure out a solution to this. Did the Australian government bend to provide Facebook some concessions? Probably. We'll find out in a couple of months, because from what I understand, in some of the changes in the law in Australia will mean that Facebook has a 2-month negotiation period, a mediation period with publishers, so that they can figure out the licensing compensation before the government steps in. So we'll find out exactly what Facebook is going to pay publishers, what publishers are going to get from Facebook, and what they give Facebook in return. We'll find that out with time. But the Australian government was definitely lobbied by Facebook, fine. But I suspect that they were lobbied more by the local media oligarchs, because people like Murdoch, for example, and News Corp are going to tell Morrison and the Australian government, look, we're getting money from Google now, thanks. Facebook has left the market. Let's get Facebook back. In other words, let's accept Zuckerberg's overture to figure out some sort of agreement. Let's accept it. Let's get Facebook to the negotiating table, and let's get a revenue stream from Facebook as well. For News Corp, it's a win. For Murdoch, it's a win. This is going to be replicated across every single country in the world. For the local media oligarchs in every country, it's a win, because they take a zero revenue stream from Google and turn it into money. They take a zero revenue stream from Facebook and turn it into money. They take a zero revenue stream from Twitter, and they're going to turn it into money. They were getting nothing from these guys. Now they're going to get something. So what's the better situation? To get money from just one big tech company, or to get money from all the big tech companies? Well, obviously to get money from all of them. So I'm sure that they also lobbied the Morrison government to say, bend the rules a little, massage this code a little bit here and there, and let's just make sure that Facebook is paying us. And so there you have it. You have now the agreement. So let's get into this article real quick and see if Reuters says anything about this deal between the Australian government and Facebook. Facebook said on Tuesday it will restore Australian news pages after negotiating changes with the government to a proposed law that forces tech giants to pay for media content displayed on their platforms. Australia and the social media group have been locked in a standoff for more than a week after the government introduced legislation that challenged Facebook and Alphabet Inc.'s Google dominance in the news content market. Facebook last week blocked Australian users from sharing and viewing news content on its popular social media platform, drawing criticism from publishers and the government. Keep in mind that Facebook was blocking not only local Australian news, but international news as well. After a series of talks between Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and Facebook CEO Zuckerberg, a concession deal has been struck with Australian news expected to return to the social media site in coming days. The issue has been widely watched internationally as other countries, including Canada and Britain, consider similar legislation. As I said, whatever's going to be done in Australia is just going to be copy and pasted throughout the world. Facebook had to figure out a deal. They had to do it. So, Australia bended to some of Facebook's demands. Yes, obviously, but I'm sure that the big winners in all of this, the local media companies and people like Rupert Murdoch, are absolutely happy with some of the code being bent and amended here and there, if they can just get more money into their coffers. Facebook has refriended Australia, and Australian news will be restored to the Facebook platform, Frydenberg told reporters in Canberra on Tuesday. Frydenberg said Australia had been a proxy battle for the world as other jurisdictions engage with tech companies over a range of issues around news and content. As I said, this is going to be the template that's going to be used around the world. While big tech companies and media outlets have battled over the right to news content in other jurisdictions, Australia's proposed laws are the most expansive and seen as a possible template for other nations. Facebook and Google have not hidden the fact that they know that the eyes of the world are on Australia, and that's why they have sought, I think, to get a code here that is workable. Frydenberg said Australia will offer 4 amendments, which include a change to the proposed mandatory arbitration mechanism used when the tech giants cannot reach a deal with publishers over fair payments for displaying news content. Facebook said it was satisfied with the revisions, which will need to be implemented on legislation currently before Parliament. Let's see what Facebook says. Quote, going forward, the government has clarified we will retain the ability to decide if news appears on Facebook so that we won't automatically be subject to a forced negotiation, Facebook Vice President of Global News Partnerships Campbell Brown said in a statement online. This is an interesting statement. This VP is saying that the government clarified that Facebook will retain the ability to decide if news appears on Facebook so that we won't automatically be subject to a forced negotiation. So this is basically saying that Facebook is going to decide what news goes on their platform in accordance with what publishers they've negotiated with. So if I'm reading this correctly, it would mean that if you don't have some sort of deal with Facebook, i.e. if you're a small-time publisher, then you might be screwed because Facebook's going to negotiate deals with the big media companies. But what about the small media companies? So if Facebook says we don't have a deal in place with the small media companies, then we're not forced to negotiate with them. I guess that's a provision which is being put into the law. They're not going to force Facebook into negotiations with publishers. And so Facebook is going to be able to pick and choose. Once again, you see the alliance between big media outlets and big tech playing out here. So this may mean bad news this may spell some bad news for medium to small publishers in Australia. I think if you're a small publisher, to be honest, if you're a really small publisher, then Facebook and Google News doesn't really play that much into your calculations for traffic, because Facebook News and Google News, they just don't put any type of small publishers into their feed anyway, into their distribution anyway. But maybe medium-sized publishers, they may have some problems here. So the Facebook VP said that the company will continue to invest in news globally, but also resist efforts by media conglomerates to advance regulatory frameworks that do not take account of the true value exchange between publishers and platforms like Facebook. The government had, up until Monday, maintained it would not change the legislation, but it did change the legislation. Analysts said while the concessions marked some progress for tech platforms, the government, and the media, there remained many uncertainties about how the law would work. The amendments include an additional 2-month mediation period before the government-appointed arbitrator intervenes, giving the parties more time to reach a private deal. It also inserts a rule that an internet company's existing media deals be taken into account before the rules take effect, a measure that Freidenberg said would encourage internet companies to strike deals with smaller outlets. So you have that 2-month mediation period. That's where we'll really find out what Facebook is giving to big media conglomerates like News Corp, and what News Corp is going to allow Facebook to publish. So there's still a ways to go until we get some more clarity as to what exactly is going on in Australia between big tech and media. Let's see what else Reuters says here. The proposed code will apply to Facebook and Google, although the competition regulator, which advised government on the legislation, has said it's likely other tech firms will be added. Exactly. There's a lot of money here for the local media publishers. A lot of money to be had. Once again, they went from getting zero money from Facebook and Google, and soon to be Twitter and other big tech platforms. Now they're going to be getting money out of these guys. So at the end of the day, whichever way you look at it, if you think Facebook won, if you think Australia won, if you think Facebook lost, if you think the Australian government lost, the real winner in all of this, without a doubt, are the media oligarchs and the big mainstream media in Australia, and soon to be the big mainstream media in every country around the world. They're the real winners in all of this. All right, guys, that is the video. Look for me on Rumble, on BitChute, and on Odyssey. Also go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, maybe a cool Duran long sleeve t-shirt. Awesome t-shirts. They look great. They feel great. They are fantastic long sleeve shirts and t-shirts at the Duran. You'll find a link down below. That is it for today. Take care.